You don't watch Marriage Story on a first date, do you? You aren't going to Christmas dinner and putting on Terrifier 3 as the holiday flick for your grandma just because there's a guy in a Santa costume. And what I mean by that is acclaimed media doesn't necessarily translate into a good time in every social situation. So why are you planning on bringing Mage Night or On Mars on your family's Thanksgiving game night? It's not hard to understand. When you go on BGG and look at those top 100 games, these are the games that are ranked by, well, geeks. These are the ones that people who are enthusiasts pick for a game night with other enthusiasts who want to play games. These aren't the games you play when it's an engagement party for your cousin's 4th marriage and everyone just wants to survive the night peacefully. All social situations have certain expectations and a goal in mind. And I've been thinking a lot about what games fit what social situation best. And with the holidays coming around, there's a lot of potential awkwardness that comes if you just bring your highest rated game and think it's going to be a slam dunk every time. And I'm sorry, dude, but your semi-literate, doom-scrolling, brain-rot, skibbity cousin doesn't want to play a 14-point game of TI-4 for 12 hours. So for this holiday season, I'm talking about the best game for every kind of social situation. And let's get into it. Friendsmas. Characteristics: high familiarity between people. It's a gathering that reinforces long-term relationships, really to reconnect and reminisce together. There's lots of in-jokes, nostalgia, conversations about life. Friendsmas, the non-denominational winter holiday of millennials. For this, I think Wavelength is the best possible board game to play. Wavelength has a lot of good things going for it. Right away, the box is aesthetic and fits right in with perusing the shelf of a Nordstrom rack. It looks like it belongs at a party, and it's reminiscent more of a friendly, trendy dating app than a board game. It immediately shrugs off any preconceived notions of what a board game is from people who might have only had negative experiences of being yelled at by their parents in Monopoly. The setup is almost instantaneous, and it plays a flexible player count while allowing people to drop in and out with minimal pain. All of this put together is perfectly suitable for a flaky group of friends who want to wine and dine their looming debt away for a night. Wavelength is a team-based game that has one player acting as the psychic, who knows where the bullseye is. They pick between two potential prompts, they spin a dial behind a hidden screen, take a look at where the bullseye is, close the dial, and then they give a clue to their team on what they think best represents where that bullseye is. Then it's up to the rest of the team to move this red little marker to hit that sweet 4-point mark. For example, if the prompt is casual versus formal, and the clue the psychic gives is sweatpants, the rest of the team has to determine how the psychic views sweatpants from a casual to formal lens. The thing is, it's based off the team's interpretation of the psychic's take on the clue. So if that particular psychic wore sweatpants at his graduation, it might read that sweatpants might be a little bit on the formal side. Teams have to dive deep into the psyche of the psychic and dig into their own interpretation of that person. Likewise, there's a lot of logic jockeying and bartering. Teams will try to logic things out, like by saying sweatpants are more formal than pajamas, but less formal than jeans. Right? Then when the dial is finally revealed, and it reveals a full-on mess, there's laughter and the psychic will desperately explain how sweatpants have never been formal, and he's just a really casual dude. It's a lot of fun trying to decipher what a psychic means when they provide a certain clue, and the subjective nature of the game makes people think about each other as individuals, which is why it's great for friend groups. Wavelength at its core is a mechanism to get to know one another through in-jokes, playing off pre-established relationships and understandings, and thinking about new facets of people. It isn't unusual for the psychic to say something like, "my older brother," or "high school English," and people who have shared the same experience can pinpoint exactly what the psychic means by that. On the other hand, new information about people can be shared in a positive environment, much like a communal therapy session with friends. In other words, Wavelength reinforces common understandings of shared experiences. It encourages an understanding of one another in a fun, lighthearted way, which is why I think it's perfect for close friends at a holiday party. Next up, we have family therapy over a turkey dinner. Characteristics of this are a very high familiarity between people. Siblings, children, parents, grandparents, everyone knows each other very well. But there's also a high range of age groups between people. There's also a high potential for unintended arguments. The goal is really just get through the evening with everyone liking each other. There's really nothing quite like going home for the holidays. There's always tons of food, familiar faces, and plenty of unsettled childhood resentment. And sometimes finding the right game to play with your family can feel like navigating a minefield. And I find that Poetry for Neanderthals somehow manages to thread the needle and provides the perfect medium for general pleasantness. Poetry for Neanderthals is a team-based game that's all about using one-syllable words while trying to get your team to guess the correct word. For example, if you have the word hat, you can give the hint "wear on head." And then if your team guessed correctly, you get a point. If you're feeling frisky, you can go for the three-pointer, which in this case would be top hat, and say something like tall, wear on head. And if you mess up and say a word with unnecessary syllables or rhymes or gestures, then you get bonked by an inflatable club. It's perfect for bonking your rival sibling for the time they took your SpongeBob Go-Gurt. But that said, the magic of Poetry for Neanderthals is that it elegantly makes everyone seem smart and stupid at the same time. The innate playfulness of using one-syllable words really helps with creating an immediately lighthearted, easy-to-laugh atmosphere. There really isn't anything to get too mad about, and any frustration is quickly alleviated with a bonk. The reality is that this inflatable mallet is the stress relief valve that moves the game from competitive team-based nightmare into a more comedic, family-friendly game. I mean, just look at this thing. It's not meant to be taken seriously. And then you add on stringing together one-syllable words, desperately trying to lead people to an answer. It's just all innately funny and lighthearted. It can be especially hard to make a game that works across generations, but word games tend to be the most successful, since most people have some experience with word-based games like Taboo, Scrabble, Wordle, or even crosswords. It isn't hard to teach something like Poetry for Neanderthals. Also, since Poetry for Neanderthals simplifies what words can be used, it does try to create an even playing field across generations. Younger kids and adults can match against each other without feeling unfair for either side. This simple concept and the de-evolution of language makes for a crowd pleaser that works perfectly for a family dinner. All of a sudden, your grumpy parents are smiling and siblings can finally bop each other with an inflatable mallet, and there's no fear of meltdowns or retaliation. So yeah, this simple premise, this simple game, works perfectly for families that might be a little bit of a dicey situation when it comes to game night. Next up, we have office parties. The characteristics are you want to maintain some semblance of professionalism. The game should be quick to teach. In general, you want something that's a little bit of a team building exercise to keep upper management happy. Great, here we go again, the office party. It's often another excuse for some strange and surreal team building exercise from some C-suite executive who just came back from his off-brand Bohemian Grove retreat. At the very least, the big league designer of Vlada Chavtil decided to give us mercy from his heavy hitters and provided us a game that's easy to teach, engaging, and overall a rather palatable experience. And it's the perfect office game for people who want nothing more than to leave their daily prison. Codenames is an ultra-popular board game about giving secret clues to your teammates to pick certain words and find all their secret agents before the enemy team, while actively trying to avoid civilians, enemy secret agents, and the assassin. To play, one player, the spy master, will say a word and a number. For example, taco 3. It is then up to the rest of the team to find the 3 words that the spy master thinks relates to taco. Like it might be a food or a vegetable or a meat or Mexico, or any various combinations that the team might be going for. Once a word is guessed from the 25 possible choices, it is then revealed as a correct or incorrect guess. If it's correct, it reveals one of the team's spies, and once all the team spies are contacted, that team wins. There's a lot of jockeying for what words can connect, and a lot of fun comes from making connections that may not seem obvious at first, but somehow all relate together. Now, office culture can always get a little dicey, but unlike getting a pizza party for your contribution into your boss's new Lambo, Codenames is fairly digestible and is an inoffensive way to spend time with people who go into the office fridge and also steal your SpongeBob Go-Gurt. It's engaging enough to have people who don't play games become enticed in its wordplay. Similar to Poetry for Neanderthals, word-based games work very well for people who have never played board games beyond Monopoly and Jenga. Codenames has that same mass appeal as games like Connections does, and can capture a passive interest in a large swath of people just by the innate cleverness of the game. When you're playing with people who aren't really gamers, it's very common for people to disengage sometimes with some games. But Codenames is clever in that it naturally tries to get multiple perspectives from different team members. So it really does feel like you are working together as a communal team, and everything just clicks when you get the right guess. Codenames' premise and gameplay work together for a very easy to explain and somewhat captivating competition that works in whatever office culture you might be in. It is pretty common for people just to be rather invested into their team's victory, and there's brief moments of jubilance that can be even found in a bleak office through playing this. And look, this might not sound like a resounding endorsement, but you really don't need to be challenging your coworkers with the new hotness when Codenames just works so well for what a normal corporate office world expects. It's a little bit generic, it's a little bit safe, but it clicks quickly and it's still a good game. And look, I'm not going to say it's the greatest party game of all time, but it might be the greatest office game out there right now. Next up, we have a party with people you don't like. For this kind of social situation, the characteristics are it's antagonistic. Nobody really gets along. The frustration is a definite, and you really want to funnel that high potential for conflict into something potentially enjoyable. There comes a time in your life where you'll be stuck in a room with people you don't like, whether that be your in-laws or an old buddy who's way too into MLMs, and you need something to do instead of arguing over any various source of conflict. Instead of those senseless, pointless fights, direct all that anger and bickering towards a potentially enjoyable experience, such as the wonderfully crafted Zoo Vadis. Zoo Vadis has quickly become one of my favorite hot mess board games, not because the game is bad. No, on the other hand, Zoo Vadis is very good, it's just very good at making people mad. At its core, Zoo Vadis is a negotiation game, where up to 7 people are trying to make their animal faction the star attraction in a zoo. In order to do so, you need to move your wonderful little animal meeples and go through all of the lesser exhibits. The thing is, you need to have enough votes in order to move up to that star exhibit. And what that means is other players will need to help you move up. With help comes deals, and with deals comes betrayal. The voting can get really nasty, and since the mechanism to vote requires a majority relative to the whole capacity of the current exhibit, it's a tense brawl all the way up to the top. Getting votes will often require bribes or promises, both of which can get extremely messy, like eating soup with your fingers. Plus, each of these wonderfully designed factions has its own aesthetic and power. For example, the armadillos let you use these nifty tunnels, or the Ipsis can allow for an extra animal to join the exhibit. Each animal power feels useful and is well designed, but the trick is that these powers can't be used on yourself, but instead are used to barter and sell to other players, and it's all part of the deal-making mechanisms. Of course, the game also involves collecting these nifty laurel tokens, and since these laurels are both the currency and point system, it's a brutal back and forth when you're trying to get into that star exhibit, because the cost can be so extreme that even though you get to that exhibit, you might be at a loss either way. At times, it can feel like you're in a lose-lose scenario, and there's nothing you can do except just justify your existence. In Zoo Vadis, you can also ruin people's days by just moving these peacocks or the zookeeper, and the smart thing is that all of these individual game mechanics are meant to create deals and points of conflict. Because Zoo Vadis eliminates players who don't make it to that star exhibit, there can be a lot of natural selection in trying to wheel and deal your way through. There will be moments where you are making 2 conflicting promises to 2 different players, and you're bound to make at least one of them mad. It's like everyone is making their own Ponzi scheme, and somehow you need to end the game without ever needing to pay back all of those people you've swindled. Zoo Vadis has an easy to explain premise, a wonderful aesthetic, and it's a mean, intense game that allows for betrayal and bickering to really bother people you would have otherwise get into nasty arguments with. It's the perfect game to play with people you're going to fight with anyways. Next up, we got Drinking with the Boys. Characteristics of this: it has to be easy to set up and teach. The game should be fast-paced to keep everyone's attention. And it has to give opportunities to snack and drink and enjoy those appies. When you're hanging out with your boys and you got some crisp sippies, you're going to want to play a game that's easy to grasp, fast-paced, and has enough shifty eyes to keep them interested. And Skull is an elegant game that really is just bluffing distilled into its purest form. The game involves placing little coaster-esque tiles down and eventually challenging the bluffs. Once a player challenges, there's a little bid where everyone is placing their bet on how many roses they can reveal before hitting a skull. The trick is you have to reveal all of your tiles first. So by challenging, you're trying to bluff that all of your tiles are safe. But since you're a handsome devil, you're really setting up a bait to sucker in other players. Or not. Maybe your tiles are all safe, but nobody needs to know that. Since Skull is all about setting up bluffs, being innocent and inconspicuous is key. Kind of like how the British named their nuclear program tube alloys. Nobody would ever think much about tube alloys, and in the same way, nobody should think much about you when you're playing Skull. You want to be devilish and clever and small, and really make those big bluffs that make other people question their existence. Skull comes in a small box, and it's a super quick teach and keeps the attention on one another throughout a game. Since it's so focused on each other's little tells, everyone is keeping shifty eyes on one another between sips, which makes it a super engaging night. In other words, a lot of the game is over non-verbal communication. It's easy to have a few sips or nibbles in between each person's turn. It's a game that gets progressively more fun as the night goes on. And since people get eliminated, it's a good chance to order more food, use the washroom, and just laugh at other people's misplays. The game is easy to drop in and out of between rounds, and you can easily play 6, 7, 8 rounds in a night. Plus, these tiles are practically coasters, but advise keeping them untarnished to not give away what tile you just put down. Anyways, Skull is supposedly an old rediscovered game from a bunch of biker gangs, and I don't know how seriously I take this preamble at the start of the instruction manual, but it does have that vibe of sitting around a dusty table while everyone's eyeing each other aggressively, which makes it a really perfect game when you're having big chugs with your sip gang. Next up, we have a flock of gamers all in a single room. Characteristics for this is that these people are familiar with games. They have knowledge, they have understanding of mechanics. And it's a large group, let's say 9 to 20 people. Those normal Euro games, those top 100 board game geek games, they won't play that many people most often. And these people want a challenging experience. It's also important that everyone should be involved and not simply spectators. And I've talked about Blood on the Clock Tower extensively before, but over the years it has proven time and time again as the premier party game for those who want a meaty game with a lot of people who all love to play games. Blood on the Clock Tower is an evolution of the classic Mafia and Werewolf formula that just takes the core idea and expands on it in brilliant ways. The core difference is that Blood on the Clock Tower uses a curated selection of roles that are put together and form a script. Because the script is a recipe for each match, it creates a new flavor depending on what roles are in each game. The game encourages an understanding of how each script and how each role interconnects in order to solve this mystery, and it's almost unlimited in terms of variety since each script is its own puzzle and each offers a new way to look at social deduction. And when Blood on the Clock Tower clicks together, there really isn't any experience that can beat it. There are so many memorable moments, from a lunatic finally realizing that they've been crazy the whole time, to the drunk cluing in on their own ineptness and somehow solving the whole puzzle in a single moment, to all the unique individual reads, like someone's Apple Watch noting a high heart rate, or people trying to decipher breathing or talking patterns, and all those individual behaviors that can compile it to make a fascinating social game. It takes everything good about Mafia and Werewolf and removes the junk like player elimination, boring roles, being a boring admin, and all those endlessly long games, and makes a tight, clever, brilliant experience. And the thing is, when you're talking about 9 or more people, it's very hard to find a meaty game that can satisfy a group of gamers. Sure, you can play Codenames or Charades or I Spy with a big group, but if they want something meaty, there's not that many options at that player count. I find that a lot of gamers want something that has interlocking mechanics, a deeper puzzle, and a game that rewards strategy and thinking. Blood on the Clocktower satisfies all of this, while also creating a social atmosphere that encourages a lot of discussion. It's as hefty as a party game should get, and game enthusiasts will devour advanced scripts, like a famished food critic. So yeah, if you got 9 to 20 people who are really into board games, there really isn't a better option. Blood on the Clocktower is perfect for a large gamer group. Next up, we got being stuck in a room with complete strangers. For this, the characteristics are: you have zero familiarity between people. Nobody knows each other. It's very likely going to be awkward, and you have no knowledge of people's behaviors or how they interact with each other or what they even like. And okay, let's say you're going to some place where you don't know a soul. What do you bring? What's the most crowd pleaser of all crowd pleasers? Is it Uno? Is it musical chairs? Is it diplomacy? No, it's Camel Up. Camel Up is super easy to teach, easy to love game about racing camels. You aren't playing as the camels, but instead gamblers who are trying to place smart bets in order to make the most money by the end of the race. You are not the camel. You are a gambler of the camels. And simply put, you can bet on a leg. You can bet on the winner or loser of the whole race. You can roll a dice and see where the camels go. You can cheer or boo in a particular space. And in games of 6 or more, you can make a betting agreement. It's all easy, and each action can be resolved in under 10 seconds. The reason why this game works so well for complete strangers is that it's hyper likable. The idea of a race, especially a race where individual player skill doesn't matter, is immediately appealing to almost anyone. There isn't any stress to perform intelligently, since you aren't making strategic decisions or drifting your camels around corners like a game of Heat. Making poor decisions is often just taking the underdog bet, which is also exciting for everyone watching. Even if you're completely off with your bets, the race itself is enthralling. It's a joy to see camels stack on top of each other, and there's true sadness when your favorite camel gets carried back by one of the crazy camels. Not to mention, there is enough RNG that even if someone who has no idea how the mechanics tie together, they still have a pretty good chance of somehow just getting lucky and taking over the whole game. It is a game where there is a winner, but the innate joy of watching a race while adding minimal stakes is just an easy combination to fall in love with. Plus, these chunky camel meeples stacking on top of each other, it's pure bliss. There's a satisfying click of the pyramid, and because the game is not team-based, you won't ever feel like you let someone else down. The race itself is the centerpiece, and the gambling adds a personal investment into that race. You'll still get to know one another, and you'll discover fellow players through their shared celebrations, the hype, the disappointment, their risk aversion. Camel Up cuts through all of that extra nonsense though, and just creates an easy to love gameplay loop that's easy to play and fun to watch, which is why it's the greatest crowd pleaser of them all, and the best game for perfect strangers. So yeah, there we go. What I think is the best game for a bunch of different types of social gatherings. I've definitely missed a ton of situations like date night, birthdays, retreats, bread bacon nights, disco night, Lord of the Ring marathons, etc., etc. But let me know what you think. What do you think would be good for a social situation? Let me know what I got wrong, what you'd recommend for future, and thank you, as always, for watching. Bye.